What if the biggest problem that's preventing the good reps from becoming the best sales reps is the fact that they're just winging it? The fact that they get comfortable, that there's no real process, there's no real structure, and they're relying too heavily on their instincts, their experience, and just hoping that it works. What if the biggest difference between good and great is actually slowing down and building a system? Welcome to Expert Insights. I'm your host, Pedro Adorno, and this is where we focus on healthcare, medtech, business, and sales. Today, I sat down with Duston Harper. Duston has spent over a decade in sales across companies like Stryker and Milwaukee Tool. He has scaled large enterprise accounts. He's even trained sales teams and now runs his own business called Ground Plan, where he helps organizations actually implement AI into their sales process to drive real ROI. We break down why most sales reps stay stuck and how top performers think in systems, not effort, and why AI is creating a massive gap between those who adopt it and adapt to it versus those who continue to fall behind. So quick note, if you're looking to break into medical sales or you know someone who is, then you need to check out Med Sales Blueprint. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and share this podcast. I welcome you to message me on LinkedIn with any questions or guest ideas. And you can find Duston on LinkedIn and his business, Ground Plan. Now let's get into it. As a sales trainer, what is the key thing that you wish you could tell everyone? Like, is there one thing that you're noticing that salespeople do or don't do that they need to know?
Great question. I would say what stands out the most to me is that the number one sales process out there is winging it, meaning that there is no sales process. 98% of people are just going off their been doing it for 20 years, their looks, their charm, their intuitiveness, and that will get you to a certain level. But I think in some of those really challenging, complex sales, let's say med device, tech sales where you can make some serious money, you can't just bank on that or your company logo. That's only going to get you so far. So having an actual process and being consistent with it, it's the opposite of what most extroverted salespeople want to do because they hate sitting down and planning and doing that type of stuff. But having a consistent process, whatever it is, I'm not saying one particular sales process, but having that blueprint every single time is what helps separate the best from the rest. And if you don't have a process and find a way to systematize it, you're just going to be winging it and you'll probably do okay, but can you become an A player doing that? I don't think so. So that's would be the main thing I would recommend to people out there.
That makes sense to me. Someone who's very successful at anything tends to be well-rounded. Everybody has their strengths and things that they lean on. And when it comes to sales, there's a lot of extroverted salespeople out there, but that doesn't mean you're not successful if you're not extroverted. If you're someone who likes to plan and think ahead, there's huge benefits to that. What are some things that should be on the calendar or that sales reps should make time for that they're not making time for on a practical sense, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly?
What comes to mind is the idea of focus. If you look at most sales reps' week, only about 30% of it is actual selling time in front of the customer, revenue generating. The rest of it tends to be more admin or feeling busy type activities. And it feels good to be busy. You're doing stuff, you're checking off the boxes, you're uploading CRM, but is that really helping you close the deal? So being relentless with that revenue generating time. For example, if I have 8 meetings in a day, which it would be blessed to have 8 meetings in a day in front of customers, but can I bring my A level of energy to all 8 of those meetings? I know for myself, that's a no, because I'm more of an adapted extrovert. I cannot bring my A level of energy to those 8 meetings. And quite frankly, are all 8 of those at the top of the pipeline and a top priority? I would venture to say no. There's probably 2 or 3 of them that are really a pipeline that could close in the next 30 to 60 days. Why am I not being relentless and focusing on those versus the rest of them? Now, if you're more commission focused or an entrepreneur, salespreneur, you're going to look at that stuff more often. If you're more base salary and bonus, you probably don't care as much because you're getting paid and it's not that big of a deal one way or the other. So being relentless with the focus, like, well, what are those 2 or 3 meetings you could cut out and focus on the deals that are actually going to close? Because the most pain in sales is working on a deal for 8 months, thinking you're going to close it, and then something happens last minute, or it really wasn't a good fit. You missed something from a few months ago. You don't get paid, your boss isn't happy, and the company's not happy because the revenue's not coming in. So being relentless with that. And then the second thing that comes to mind is context switching. I really noticed this when I went into more commission focused jobs and doing my own thing. But for example, if I'm doing podcasts right now and interviewing, let's say I do 2 or 3 in a row, I'm sort of getting in that flow state. I'm feeling good. I'm vibing. And if I go straight into a
Yeah.
customer call right after that, it might be a little awkward for me to transition. So can you stack customer facing meetings at certain times of the week? I like to meet between Tuesday and Thursdays, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., very customer focused, client facing, and I get in the flow. Mondays are more admin, preparing for the week, getting ready for the big presentations. Fridays more of a recap, post-mortem, doing podcasts like this because my brain's a little freer. Breaking up your week like that, I think, is the A players start doing that, and you, especially if you've been doing it for a while, you start getting in more of a flow state.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense because, there's those who really want to push, right? Like, I'm going to stay up, I'm going to keep working. The mentality of this grind mentality, which, not to say that you shouldn't grind, but also being mindful and conscious of your body. And to your point, with the way our brains work, whether we like it or not, we we're not going to be as effective if we're jumping from one task to a completely different type of task. And I think that's a huge takeaway, and that's something I only recently learned about myself within the last couple of years, through investments that I've had, but also selling and also trying to pull myself in different directions. Especially those who have families know that too. So when you're in that flow, maintain that flow. So that's really good. when when it comes to, so you've been in the room, um, where everybody's sitting there and listening to you and learning from you as to the best practices for selling. What is it like interacting with the managers in the room, right? Because the account executives and the sales representatives and the associates are there. Are the managers looking to learn from you? Are they questioning you? Are they threatened by, like, what is the dynamic as a sales trainer and the manager?
It's tough. I'm not gonna lie. I got hit in the face many times out of the gates trying to do that because first off, when you talk about sales process, whether it be Challenger, Sandler, Medic, all these ones that are out there, people are very passionate about it. So if they grew up being a Sandler or Challenger, whatever it is, it's really hard to convince them otherwise. In fact, you're not going to convince people that don't want to be convinced, is what I came to the conclusion on. So before I'd even get into that room, I had to do a lot of triage with, okay, I'm not going to convince Pedro because he's gung ho on the med sales blueprint methodology or whatever it is. First,
Mm,
I was trying to convince those people, which made my life way more difficult. And so that's the number one thing. Once you do get in the room, a lot of things I try to vet out before are, do they have an investment in their team type culture? Do they have this learn it all mentality that they want people to succeed, whether that be make more money or get promoted? That was usually a
mm,
very big green flag for me to get in the door, and people that were way more open-minded and not trying to battle with me all the time. Because you're right, as a sales trainer, just instinctively, I think sales leaders, they feel threatened. They feel like you're trying to make them look bad. So you have to try to break that barrier at the beginning to do that. So I do a lot of work before I even get to that workshop or whatever it is to make them feel like I'm part of the team. Because if I don't do that and I just show up, I'm going to get all those those blocks and those walls that you talked about, and it's probably not going to go very well. So I learned the hard way, with a couple probably not going as good as I would have hoped, and
Yeah.
asked the tough questions earlier, and then tried to be very vulnerable. I think just being vulnerable and authentic out of the gates, breaking the ice very quickly of like, hey, look, guys, I'm a salesperson. I've always been a salesperson. I think it's the best job out there. I've made a ton of mistakes. I'm going to share some of my mistakes today so that hopefully you can learn from them and ultimately make more money and close more deals. If I can open it up like that, I feel like it does lessen the tension a little bit, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
It really is hard.
So now I want to ask you about AI, the implementation, the integration of AI into the sales world. Tell me about your thoughts on where we're at, where we're headed, what companies should be doing, what sales reps should be doing or should not be doing.
Definitely.
Just open-ended on AI and sales.
Definitely. So just a little bit more about my background. I've typically been a workhorse type mentality that would just get things done and outwork people, which is a good trait to a certain extent. But what happens when the horse gets tired and runs out of steam? Because it definitely does happen later in your career.
Mhm.
So I think over the last few years, I've really been able to learn how to automate more stuff and systematize things where before I would just brute force get stuff done. And the most eye-opening part of that was when I joined an AI company. I saw basically, hey, the next decade, this is going to change the world, something that you and I have probably not seen since the dot-com era, and it's probably growing faster than that. So I joined an AI company, which gave me a crash course of getting in the game. I think, just getting in the game is a start. And it's one thing just to use ChatGPT or Gemini a little bit to ask questions, but working for an AI company just took it to the next level. So I would say, going back to your question, it's scary, but technology is always scary. You go back to 100 plus years ago, people that were horse and buggy selling horse and buggies, they were worried about the cars, and cars came and did what they did. People that were farmers were worried about tractors, and everyone's freaking out about it. TV and radio, this stuff keeps happening over and over again, but you can't fight technology. It's a Gary V quote: technology is undefeated. The more you fight it, the further behind you're going to get. So how can you see it as a positive, right? Of, hey, I'm a salesperson and I make commission based off closing deals. Things like admin and data entry and follow-up really suck up a lot of my week. What if I could automate that and get it into some AI tool? That way I'm more fresh, I have more energy, and I close more deals and make more money. You have to try to
Right.
flip the script to be like, how does it help me be better at my job? And this is a trend that is being talked about a lot right now, but it's not that it's going to replace salespeople, because you need that person that has the rapport, that has the know, like, and trust, that can negotiate. That's going to become even more important. But if that salesperson doesn't know how to use AI effectively to be more productive and navigate that, you're probably going to get replaced at some point by somebody that knows how to use AI better to their advantage. So it's not that it's going to replace you altogether. It's just the people that know how to use it at a high level will probably float to the top. It's happening fast too. That's the other thing I would say. It's crazy. It's chaotic. The past few years, every day is different with it. So you have to be a little careful which tools you pick, and you're going to make some mistakes for sure. But
Yeah.
I feel strongly that the best salespeople who double down on it to be more productive are going to just continue to rise to the top. And people that don't embrace it or fight it as long as they can, it's probably going to backfire at some point in their career.
If you've made it this far, go ahead and click subscribe now so you do not miss the next one. And if you or a friend want help breaking into medical sales, the best place to go is medsalesblueprint.com. Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the biggest fears that people have, no matter what you do or what industry you're in, is to waste time pursuing an initiative and then it amounts to nothing. Whether it's like a flash in the pan product, or you chose the wrong company or the wrong consulting firm or whatever it may be, or you hired the wrong person, they didn't work out. And it's like, I just spent all this time, energy, effort, and money and focus. And where did it get me? So for those, and here's my thought on it, for those people who are out there avoiding their first steps into AI, I hear you. I feel you. I understand you. You are heard. I hear you. But you're making a mistake. And not to look at AI as binary, AI or not AI. It's AI has grown to the point where there are things within it to learn about. There are companies that will come and go. There are tools that will come and go very quickly. And I think finding mentorship and guidance to help reduce the amount of time of redundancy or time that will be spent on an initiative that didn't work out or pan out in the way that you wanted. It's inevitable, kind of accept it. I know I did. I made mistakes um, choosing companies online to put a chunk of a portion or a department of my business into that. And it didn't, I made a mistake by doing so. My mistake was just going with online ads and very little, what would you call it? Very little diligence. And even if I did do diligence, the best diligence, in my opinion, is finding a mentor, a physical human who has been through that, who has done the research, and they can tell you, walk you through, or guide you, or even hire that individual to help you forward your business or yourself, whatever it is, and reduce the likelihood that you're going to be wasting your time trying to figure it out yourself. So put that in your budget, because AI is here, it's here to stay, and it's growing and it's impacting us. And if you're not involved in it in any way, shape, or form, you're falling behind. Fact. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news,
No
but it
doubt.
could be your advantage. That's my PSA on it.
Yeah. And I mean, you brought up a good point too. I like doing a time audit, going back to the time blocking and context switching, figure out what is taking up the most time of your week from an admin standpoint. And that's one
Yeah.
great use case that you could use for AI. Maybe it's entering CRM data for 10 hours a week. I'm just making that up. There's stuff out there
Mm-hmm.
that will help you enter it for you and take that off your weight so that you can be more focused on your customers and ultimately serving them. That idea of service and getting the outcomes that they want and being at your best. That's what I look at AI as. But it takes time. You got to start small. I think people make mistakes by they get overwhelmed by everything out there, which I do too. It's a lot, and they look at too many different things. They try to go too big, too fast. Just start small. Figure out ways where you're spending a ton of time, and most likely your
Yeah.
company probably already has some resources that you can use, or it's pretty cheap to do
Mm.
some stuff and get things automated quickly. So
No, you're 100% spot on. And the other thought I have, and I've been teetering on this thought for a couple weeks now, it's like, to call it AI, it can be grandiose. It can make things intimidating. It can scare people off. Um, and I'm starting to look at AI as just a really complex algorithm, something that can do a lot, but to think that it has a brain behind it is giving it more than it deserves, in my opinion. After I've gone through the point where I recognize a lot of the limitations that it has. And I'm recognizing limitations because my expectations of it were so high. If you look at it as a tool, a very complex tool that can do a whole lot of things at once very quickly, fantastic. That's what it is, and it can help humans and to do whatever they want. But to think that it's a big brain, it'll make all these great decisions, I think is a mistake, at least for now. And so for for whoever needs to hear this, that might be helpful in reducing the frustration that you might have with it and being intimidated and overwhelmed by it. If you just look at it more as a complex algorithm, a really highly processed, high processing algorithm. Another, again, my 2 cents.
well said.
So with everything that you have done, and I mean, you worked for Milwaukee, which I think is probably, if not the best tool company, Stryker, arguably the best medical sales company. What have you learned being around very successful organization, being a part of very successful organizations, and learning from, I imagine, really great salespeople? Is there anything that sticks out?
Yeah, a couple of stories. So with Milwaukee Tool, they had a parent company called TTI that owned them, Ryobi, Rigid, a lot of other big brands. And Milwaukee was only about a $500 million company in 2007. Okay. Today, they're over 10 billion with a B. So, which is really hard to do with physical products. So they've had epic growth the past 20 years or so. But one thing that they did during the really, I guess, great recession of our time in 2008, it was a terrible time for power tools, construction. It was a disaster in real estate. And there was times where Milwaukee was, barely had any money left from what I understood. And they were on
Hmm.
their last ropes. But the parent company came in and they started doubling down on hiring talent at colleges. So when all the competitors like DeWalt, Makita, the big ones out there, they were like laying people off, toning back, like not investing in any new products. TCI did the opposite. They doubled down on like a college recruiting program to get like-minded people that were go-getters that wanted to break into sales and marketing and recruiting, ramp that up significantly. They also invested heavily in new products during that time. Now you have to have some cash to do that and all that, but they, instead of pulling back during that time, they doubled down. And that was one thing that always stuck with me is during a recession or during an unweary time, I guess, there's like a war going on right now. The companies that invest and find ways to navigate that tend to come out on top a decade later, 20 years later. So that always stood out with me. And then on the individual side, I I think going back to something we talked about before is finding those top reps. This doesn't happen as much as you think, but if you find the people that are crushing it, that have been the top rep years in a row, what are they doing? What is their day to day like?
Yeah.
What Most of the time, if you ask them the right way, like they want to help other people, they will share some of their insight. They're not going to say no if you do it the right way, but it's very rare that people actually ask that. They're just kind of running around, working hard, grinding. So I got lucky out of the gates that one of my mentors was one of the top reps at Milwaukee, and he helped me get my first promotion. And 10 years later, he was working as Chicker as an individual contributor. He helped me get a interview at Stryker 10 years later because I kept that shit.
Wow.
And, I was sort of riding his coattails for that first 10 to 12 years of my career. And we still joke about it now. You never know where that can lead. And I think just trying to find those top reps and learn from them because there's patterns in any business and any sales environment. So learn the good patterns and
Yeah.
the bad patterns quickly versus just figuring it out on your own, which most people do it that way.
Patterns. Patterns. I like that, because it is about consistency and sticking to the fundamentals and making sure your days and your weeks and what you're doing, even though it might not be fun and interesting, right? But making sure you keep doing it. I compare it to I played college baseball, never played in the minors, and I would ask my friends who got drafted and such, like, what do they do there, right? And they're like, if anything, it's more boring. We stick to straight up the fundamentals. Like shortstops, what are they doing? They're taking ground balls because the amount of times that they actually have to dive for a ball is a fraction of the percentage that they get a routine ground ball hit to them. So it's the same thing with almost anything. If you want to be really good for a sustained period of time, it's making sure that you stick to the fundamentals, right? Whether it's putting it into your CRM, scheduling, creating the right time, waking up at the right time, having a morning routine, whatever that means to you, especially you who's actually trained people on that, the ideal salesperson's day and week, but trying to working on your discipline more than anything. So probably the most successful people out there are disciplined in doing the right things. Um, all right. So what I do want to know is what your focus is now. I know we've discussed it, and I'm grateful that you actually came to me for my thoughts on it. But I think what you have going on is really interesting, and I'd love for you to talk more about your current focus.
Yeah, appreciate that. My journey is pretty unique. I worked at the big companies, as you talked about, the Stryker and the Milwaukee Tool, and that was a great foundation. And I learned so much and grateful for that experience. But I always had this entrepreneurial bug. I kept getting more and more commission focused. So I started delving into the startup world past 4 or 5 years and have some bumps and bruises from that, quite frankly. It doesn't always work out how you expect it to in the startup world, doing your own thing. It's probably the hardest sales job there is out there. But what my current venture is really compounds some of my strengths that I've learned over the past 15 years. First off, most of my success in sales, I saw myself as almost a project manager, breaking down the silos of these big companies and managing that deal from start to finish and helping communicate between different business units. So I always would reference myself as a project manager, and I have a very architectural mind. When I've done some of these culture index, that's what came back. So that's been a strength for me for a
Mm,
long time, which is somewhat unique compared to a lot of salespeople. And then the last few years specifically, we talked about AI. I've seen a lot of chaos, as we mentioned, because there's so many tools, there's so many options out there, and especially in laggard industries, medical device, industrial manufacturing, they don't know what's good, what's bad. They don't know where to start. They're finding a tool that they probably have no business buying and spending 50K on. They're ultimately
yeah.
not getting the ROI that they want. But then they have their CEO pounding on them, hey, be more efficient with AI, grow sales by 30%, reduce the workforce with AI, all these different things that are getting thrown at them. So the gap that I kept seeing, and I just saw so much pain, was that there's no one really there to help guide them, to be a Sherpa, to be a project manager. But hey, here's some suggestions of ways that you could go with AI. Start small, focus on one use case. Here's some things that could give you time back so that you can be in front of the customer more. There's not a lot of people doing that right now. There's overall transformation, big consultants, but that niche on sales teams and those laggard industrial type industries is where I saw an opportunity and something that I was pretty passionate on that compounds some of my strengths over the years. So this is not my first go at it. It's my second go. And the company is called Ground Plan Co. It's an architectural word, basically like you got to have a foundation and start from the bottom before you can start bringing in a bunch of other stuff, which is basically what's happened with AI. I think there's a lot of band-aid AI going on right now where people just think they can bring in a tool magically, it's going to get the outcomes, but that's not the case.
Right.
I am being that Sherpa, that guide to help people make the right decisions. And let's be honest, change management's the hardest part of almost everything. And I give them a guide out of the gates. And then if they want more in-depth project management, change management with those AI tools, I offer that as, a long-term option and, try to provide a lot of value outside of that. So I'm excited about it. It's a constantly changing space, but I feel like there's a ton of momentum and I feel passionate that I know a lot of things that have been helping me and I know the future of sales is definitely going to have to use it. So that's going to be my focus, man.
That's huge. I think it's gonna blow up. I really do. You're mixing real, genuine business with AI. That's one dichotomy that you're helping bring together for people. And then it's I think any leader, a part of with a large organization definitely knows it. Those with smaller organizations are dealing with it. It's these keywords: implementation, utilization, transformation, change management, right? Strategy. Those who work in that realm, a lot of the times it's consultants and third parties coming in like a breath of fresh air, but also understanding the actuality between this in theory will be great once we implement it, once everyone uses it. And it's like, who's the person to say, who has the guts to say to leadership, do you really expect me to do this every day? Or how do you expect us to do all these things at the same time? Or have you even looked into the actual utilization of it? Like there tends to be a disconnect or a lack of honest either lack of understanding or honest conversation between the two because maybe it's your boss and you don't feel comfortable doing it, or you've been a part of the organization for so long that you can't see past what you're so used to. So having someone come in is always crucial. It's kind of like a mentor but for a company rather than a person, to be able to recognize what should be implemented. How do we implement it? Is it worth implementing or do we look at something else? So once you showed that to me, I'm totally bought in. And yes, it works for your background with how unique it is. Big company, small company, different types of industries. So sorry, I got your back on this
No,
one. It
I
makes
appreciate that.
it makes complete sense to me.
And yeah, and look, I've been on both sides of it. I've made a ton of mistakes. I've had implementations that go terrible. I've seen like every aspect. So I'm trying to bring in an authentic realm to it. I don't want to be an AI
Yeah.
expert. I don't think there is any. AI experts, maybe a few, but it's so much changing. Like I just want to be authentic. That's why the more industrial space is going to be a better fit for me versus maybe software or SaaS that are in a different part. But yeah, it's someone has to have the tough conversation early on. And if you're a vendor,
Yeah.
I love vendors. I've always been on that side. You you're going to do what you need to do to get a deal done in most cases. But if I can be the person just, calling out some of those red flags and build up that trust, still have a lot of vendors that I love and support and want to, reference to, but there's a lot of things that need to
Yeah.
be done. That foundation I'm talking about before you bring it in. For example, if you have leaders that aren't governing it and practicing what they preach, pretty much not going to get any adoption. That's one thing that
Right.
stands out. If you don't have like the highest and best use case that you're bringing in AI for, pretty much
Mm-hmm.
probably not going to get used very much. So there's a few things that if you don't check those off at the beginning, it's just destined to fail. It's not the tool's fault. It's not the AI's fault necessarily. It's more of a human thing. It's a change management. And that's what I'm trying to really guide people on and have those tough conversations and then start small too. You can't just bring in whatever the newest version of Claude, when you have all these varying levels of ability with AI. Some sales reps probably use Claude daily. Some don't even log into a Teams
Mm-hmm.
meeting and can't even figure that out. So like you have to understand all that stuff. And yeah, I've just got pretty passionate about it and then hopefully I can help, man. I'm excited about it.
No, you will. 100%. 100%. It's an underappreciated aspect of business, getting that outside perspective, but also coming from someone who sees it and can call it out and has the demeanor, and the professionalism, and can speak with conviction about it. You don't necessarily have to be experienced in AI. It's experienced in understanding the different levels of an organization and what works and what doesn't. So yeah, man, super grateful to have you on. Is there anything else that you want to leave with? Any final words here?
I would say a big thing for me, we didn't talk about a ton, is this idea of just personal development and just always trying to hit that bar. You're always gonna raise the bar. You're never gonna fully hit it. So whether it's your personal life or your professional, always having that mentality. And then a big thing for me right now is trying to limit regrets. You're not gonna get rid of regrets, right? That's impossible. But how can you limit regrets so that way later in your life, you feel really fulfilled, whether that be personally, professionally, and all these different things. So I think you definitely should take some calculated risks to avoid some of those regrets. And that's a big focus of mine. So I'll leave you guys with that.
Love it. Thanks, brother.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And remember, if you or a friend want a job in medical sales, the best place to go is medsalesblueprint.com.